Hey everyone, and welcome to the show. It's like when you think about all the families that came before us, right? Their whole lives were shaped by all these crazy forces, like stuff they barely even had any control over.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And then all the wild twists and turns that just completely define their destinies.
Totally.
It really makes you wonder about all those hidden stories tucked away in our own family histories.
It really
Like,
does.
what if we could, uncover those last chapters?
Right. It's so fascinating to think about.
Yeah, and how all these huge historical movements actually played out, in the day-to-day lives of these families.
Absolutely, like right there in those personal moments.
Exactly. So today, we're diving deep into a book called Family and Fortune.
Oh, cool.
It's historical fiction, and it's written by Pauline Wilson.
Okay.
And get this, she was inspired by the true stories of her own ancestors from 19th century England and Australia.
Wow, that's a great premise.
It is right.
Yeah.
Talk about bringing history to life.
Sure.
And she really pulls you into this whole world of resilience and family bonds that are tested by all kinds of hardship.
Oh, I bet.
And then there's the whole element of fate, like those unexpected turns that life throws your way.
Yeah, fate always has a few tricks up its sleeve.
For sure. So if you're into stories that weave personal lives into the bigger picture of history,
I know I am.
then definitely hit that like and subscribe button because we've got more deep dives like this coming your way.
Can't wait.
So okay, you can actually find a link to Family and Fortune on Amazon. It's
Yeah.
down in the description.
Awesome.
And just a little bit about Pauline Wilson, the author. She's from Northeast Victoria in Australia, and she's clearly super passionate about history and research.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Oh yeah. And this is actually her third novel.
Wow, so she's definitely got the writing bug.
She does. And for anyone who wants to connect with Pauline directly, you can find her on Instagram. Her handle is at Pauline Mary Wilson.
Okay, got it.
And she's on Facebook too at Pauline Wilson Author. Or you can sign up for her newsletter at www.donnianpaulinewilson.com.o/news.
Perfect. I'll definitely check those out.
So for this deep dive, our mission is to really understand the starting points of two main characters in Pauline's novel.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. So we've got Marianne Turner in rural England, and then this young man named Richard.
All right.
And the excerpts we're looking at today, they give us these glimpses into their lives before they even meet.
Ooh, so this is like the backstory.
Exactly. It's like setting the stage.
Love it.
Okay, so let's unpack all of this starting in 1845 in a tiny village called Wilden in Bedfordshire, England. And we're going to drop in on young Marianne at school.
Sounds good.
So what really jumped out at you about this opening scene?
You know what it was? Like right away, you feel this tension, right? And
Yeah.
it's all because Lord Robotham is visiting the school.
Yeah.
And he's not just any visitor. He's like the big guy, the main landowner in the whole area. And families like Marianne's, they basically depended on him, because they were his tenants.
They were at his mercy, kind of.
Exactly. And then there's the teacher, Mr. Harvey. Oh my gosh, he's so strict.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's that whole thing about the boy getting caned for giving the wrong answer.
Oh, gosh.
It really makes you think about the rigid social hierarchy back then
Yeah, totally different world.
and the power dynamics at play, even in a little village school.
It's almost hard to imagine, isn't it?
Yeah, so different from today.
Okay, so picture this. You've got Lord Robotham, right? He's this imposing figure
I'm picturing him.
in his fancy velvet frock coat and a silk top hat.
Oh, yeah, very distinguished looking.
Right. And he's looking over all the children with his steely glare. And then he actually says, "Do you know anything at all?"
Oh, wow, condescending much.
Total power move.
For sure.
And it's so much more than just a school visit, right?
Yeah, it's a statement.
It's a reminder of where they stand in society.
Exactly, reminding them of their place.
Okay, so then poor Marianne, she's trying to be invisible in her plain little dress.
Oh, I bet.
And then, boom, Lord Robotham points right at her
Oh, no.
and asks her what the capital of Scotland is.
Oh, my gosh, I'd be terrified.
I know, right?
Talk about pressure.
And the story leaves us hanging there.
Ah, the suspense.
I know, it's so effective though, right?
Oh, it is. It totally puts you in her shoes.
You can feel that childhood fear of being put on the spot,
Totally, especially when it feels like the stakes are so high.
even if it's just a geography question.
Yeah, exactly.
But, okay, then we shift from the school to Marianne's home.
Okay.
And her parents, Samuel and Anne, they're dealing with some serious worries.
What's going on?
Their biggest concern is that Lord Robotham is enclosing more and more common land.
Oh, that's not good.
No, wasn't good at all.
Sure.
So for our listeners, can you explain what that meant for families like Marianne's?
Okay, so basically, back then, families in rural areas, they had certain rights to use common land.
Okay.
So they could graze their animals, collect firewood, things like that.
Okay, makes sense.
But enclosure meant that landowners, like Lord Robotham, they were fencing off that land and making it their private property.
So these families were losing their livelihoods.
Exactly. It was a huge deal. And for Samuel and Anne, it meant they had less land to graze their sheep, which was a big part of how they made a living.
That's rough.
Yeah, it was a tough situation for a lot of people.
And even though Marianne is lost in her book,
Yeah.
she's kind of listening in on her parents' conversations.
Always one ear open.
Right. It shows that she's aware of what's going on, even if she doesn't totally get it.
Yeah, she's picking up on their anxiety.
And I think Pauline Wilson does a great job there, showing how those big societal changes were impacting families.
Oh, totally.
Okay, so then we get this glimpse into a typical evening for them. Simple meal, everyone gathered around the stove.
Sounds cozy.
Right. And Marianne's trying to cheer up her dad by talking about Lord Robotham's visit to the school.
Oh, bless her heart.
But his response is so gruff, and he seems really down.
You can tell he's carrying a lot.
It's that contrast between a child's innocent perspective and the weight of the adult world.
Totally. She wants to make him feel better, but it's just too much.
Yeah, and she notices how tired he is. And even though her mom says it's just tiredness, Marianne doesn't really believe it.
That's insightful.
It is. And then she starts picturing her parents as royalty.
Oh, that's sweet.
It's so touching, right? It's like her imagination is a way to escape from all the worry.
It's like a coping mechanism.
Exactly.
It really shows that resilience that kids have.
Yeah, finding comfort in a world that can be really confusing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now let's switch gears completely and go across England, where we meet Richard.
Okay.
And his early life is like the total opposite of Marianne's.
Really?
Yeah, it's like night and day.
Yeah.
And it really shows you the huge gap between the haves and have-nots in 19th century England.
Oh, I bet.
So Richard's life has been all about stealing.
Wow.
But he did it because he felt like he had to, because of what he called the oppression from greedy landlords.
So he saw it as a necessity.
Exactly. It wasn't like he enjoyed being a criminal.
Yeah, it sounds like he was desperate.
So what does this tell us about the different realities people were facing back then?
It shows just how unequal things were back then.
Yeah,
For some people, survival meant doing things that were against the law.
just to get by.
Exactly.
And Richard had already been to prison twice. The first time was around 1840, and it was for stealing bread with his friends. And the punishment was brutal, a whipping.
That's so harsh.
It's crazy to think that they would do that for stealing food.
It shows how unfair the justice system was, especially for the poor.
Totally. Okay, so then we meet Richard's partner in crime, George Lee,
Okay.
and their crimes get way more serious.
No.
Break into Lord Robotham's manor.
No way. Wait, that's the same Lord Robotham from Marianne's story?
It is.
Wow, small world.
Right. It's like these two worlds are starting to connect.
This is getting good.
So they get help from a maidservant who's totally terrified,
I bet.
and they're planning to steal silver. But then George takes a gun.
Oh no, that changes things.
It's a big turning point.
Yeah. Now it's not just about stealing to survive.
Exactly. It's something else entirely. And what's interesting is that Richard's not comfortable with this.
Really?
Yeah, he even tries to talk George out of taking the gun,
Interesting.
which shows that he has some morals,
Yeah, like he has a line he doesn't want to cross.
Exactly. So they escape into the woods.
Did they get away?
Well, George is all excited about the gun, but Richard's freaking out,
I bet.
especially because the butler saw them.
Uh-oh.
It's like you could feel that things are about to go really wrong.
Yeah, that's never good.
And sure enough, Richard gets arrested by this guy, Ezra Taylor. And it happens right when he's about to go to work with his dad.
Wow. Talk about bad timing.
It's like this stark contrast between his normal life and then, boom, he's caught up in this crime.
Life can change so fast.
It really can. Now, the maidservant, she testifies in court,
Oh, wow.
and she admits that she helped them.
I wonder why.
Well, she says she wanted to escape her master, who was apparently a real tyrant.
Oh, so she was desperate too.
Exactly, and she makes a point of saying that she only cared about the silver, not the gun.
Why do you think that's important?
I think she was trying to downplay her role in the crime.
Yeah, make herself seem less guilty.
Right, and it worked because she didn't get punished,
Wow, so she got off scot-free.
basically. But for Richard and George, it's terrible news.
What happened?
They get sentenced to transportation to Van Diemen's Land.
Wait, where's that?
It's Tasmania.
Oh, wow.
and they're sentenced for 10 years.
10 years. That's a long time.
It was basically a one-way ticket to a really harsh place,
Oh, man.
and Richard is devastated. He thinks he'll never see his family again.
I can't even imagine.
And then we see his parents in the courtroom, his mom's crying silently, and his dad just has this unforgiving look on his face.
That's heartbreaking.
It really shows the shame and grief that came with a sentence like that.
And the impact on the whole family.
Exactly. All right, so let's jump back to Marianne in 1845.
Oh.
While Richard's life is taking this crazy turn,
Right.
Marianne's having a pretty normal day at a fair with her brothers, Charles and Josiah.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, it's a nice contrast to what's happening with Richard. It really shows how unpredictable life can be.
Definitely.
So Charles is being a typical older brother, bossy.
Oh, I bet.
And Marianne's drawn to all the interesting things at the fair, like the thimble rigger stall and the witch's stall.
Oh, cool.
You can just picture her wide-eyed and curious about everything.
She sounds adorable.
She is. And then her dad comes back from meeting Lord Robotham. He's totally different, sullen and withdrawn.
Oh, it's not good.
It's like this instant sign that something's wrong.
Yeah, the mood just shifts.
Right. And back at home, they find out that Samuel lost his job as Lord Robotham's bailiff.
What? Why?
Lord Robotham hired a new bailiff. So now Samuel's just a laborer.
So he got demoted.
Yeah, and his wages are way lower.
Wow, that's awful.
It's a huge blow to their finances.
It must put so much stress on the family.
It did. And Anne suggests that maybe she can make some extra money by making lace.
Oh, wow.
And Marianne, being the sweet kid she is, offers to leave school to help.
That's so selfless.
She really cares about her family.
Yes, he does.
But her mom says no.
Of course.
But her dad hesitates.
What does that mean?
It shows how serious their money problems are.
Yeah, they're having to consider some really tough choices.
Choices that could affect Marianne's future.
For sure.
Okay, so let's go back to Richard.
All right.
His journey to Van Diemen's Land is a total nightmare.
I bet.
He's on this convict ship called the Marion. And it's 1845. The conditions are just awful.
Like how bad?
It's cramped and dark. There's no ventilation, and the stench is unbearable.
Oh.
And they're shackled most of the time with barely any room to move.
Oh, my God.
And the worst part is the captain decides not to stop at Cape Town.
No way. So they're stuck on that ship even longer.
Exactly. And then they hit the storms around Cape Horn.
Ooh, that's rough.
It's violent storms, constant seasickness, and the ship's prison is literally filled with vomit and excrement.
Oh, that's just horrible.
It's unimaginable. They finally arrive in Hobart Town in September 1845.
Wow.
It's spring, but it's freezing, and all the prisoners are weak and look terrible.
I bet.
Richard feels a tiny bit of hope when he sees land.
Yeah, I can understand that.
But then reality sets in.
Right, he's in a penal colony.
Exactly. He gets assigned to Long Point and is relieved to see his friend Roger from the ship.
At least there's a familiar face.
Right, and he wants to avoid George at all costs.
Oh, makes sense.
And he's just focused on keeping his head down and working hard, hoping to build some kind of life there.
Good for him.
He works on growing crops, hay, vegetables, and taking care of livestock.
It's so hard labor.
Yeah. But then after a few months, something good happens.
What's that?
They take off his leg irons.
Wow.
It's painful at first because his legs are so weak, but then he feels so much relief,
Yeah, I bet it's like a huge weight lifted.
and he can finally move around more freely.
That's gotta feel amazing.
It does, and Richard's determined to stay out of trouble.
I'm rooting for him.
Me too.
Oh.
But it's tough.
Yeah, I bet.
The work is brutal. He's out in the freezing rain pulling turnips, and the guards are always threatening them with whips.
It's a harsh existence.
And one guard seems to really hate Richard.
Oh, no.
It shows how much power the guards had over the convicts.
Yeah, and how vulnerable they were.
Exactly.
I think.
After almost a year at Long Point, Richard tries to escape from Maria Island.
Wow, he must have been desperate.
The conditions were just too much.
I can't blame him for trying.
But he gets caught.
Oh, no.
And they put the leg irons back on and throw him in solitary confinement.
That's harsh.
And then he's brought before the superintendent and charged with being absent from his post.
It's like they wanted to make an example of him.
Right. No tolerance for disobedience.
So now what? What happens to him?
Well, that's a story for another deep dive.
Okay, I can't wait.
So we're leaving Marianne and Richard in 1845. Marianne's family is struggling to survive in rural England,
Right.
and Richard's on the other side of the world, stuck in a brutal penal colony.
Their lives are so different.
They are. And it seems almost impossible that their paths will ever cross.
Yeah, it's like they're worlds apart.
It makes you think about all the things that shape our lives, doesn't it?
It does.
Like, how much is because of society? How much is our own choices? And how much is just plain luck?
Yeah, it's a mix of everything.
And even though they're so far apart and facing so much hardship,
Right.
you have to wonder if there are already these tiny little connections forming that could bring them together someday.
I like that idea.
It's like fate is weaving its web.
Totally.
We've only just scratched the surface of their stories.
I know, there's so much more to explore.
And sometimes the biggest surprises happen when lives that seem totally separate collide.
I can't wait to see what happens next.
Me neither. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive into family and fortune.
That was great.
Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
What really stood out to you about Marianne and Richard's early lives?
That's a tough one. There's so much to think about.
I know, right? Tell us in the comments below.
Yeah, we want to hear your thoughts.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, please like, subscribe, and share it with anyone who might be interested.
Spread the word.
Until next time, keep exploring the depths.
See them.